Michael Carter never imagined his life would change in such a way. At 58 years old, he had always been an active man. He never had serious health problems, and despite his age, he believed he still had plenty of energy to live. But that morning, something happened. He was climbing the stairs at home when he felt a sudden fatigue. His legs began to tremble, and a heavy sensation took over his body. He tried to ignore it, continuing step by step. But suddenly, a strong dizziness hit him. His heart raced. He grabbed the handrail, feeling an inexplicable weakness. For a moment, he felt a fear he had never felt before. What was happening to him? Slowly, his breathing calmed down. Michael laughed nervously, convincing himself that it was nothing serious. Maybe he hadn't slept well. Maybe he was just stressed from work. But deep down, something told him something was wrong. When he reached the kitchen, he followed his usual routine. He grabbed his favorite mug and filled it with steaming black coffee. He took a long sip, savoring the bitter taste, believing it would make him feel better. But it didn't. In the following weeks, the symptoms only worsened. Fatigue became constant. He started feeling muscle weakness, as if his body was heavier than before. His mood changed, and even his concentration at work suffered. He tried to find explanations. Maybe it was just life's pace. Maybe it was age. But then, he realized something frightening. Even his virility seemed to be declining, and at that moment, panic truly set in. Michael could no longer ignore it. Something inside him was slowly shutting down. But the question was, what? The hidden danger in his routine. One afternoon, Michael met up with his friend Tom Henderson for lunch. Tom was a bit younger, but they had always had similar habits. They worked hard, ate similar foods, and shared an unquestionable love for coffee. While eating, Michael decided to open up. "Man, I've been feeling weird lately. My energy seems to have disappeared. My legs feel weaker, and I wake up exhausted every day. I've never been like this before." Tom frowned. "Have you been sleeping well?" "Yes. 7 to 8 hours a night." "And your diet? Any changes?" Michael shook his head. Nothing out of the ordinary. Tom put down his fork and paused before asking, "What about coffee? How much are you drinking per day?" Michael laughed. "Coffee? Exactly. How much?" Michael thought for a moment. 3, 4 cups a day, sometimes 5, but that's never been a problem. Tom leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. "Man, I used to drink that much too. But a few months ago, I noticed my energy was plummeting, my focus was getting worse, and I started researching. That's when I found something no one talks about." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying coffee is bad for you?" "Not exactly. The problem isn't just the coffee, but the effect it has on your body over time." Michael fell silent for a moment. Something about the conversation unsettled him. He had never questioned coffee's impact on his life. "If I were you, I'd look into it," Tom said, seriously. That night, the conversation wouldn't leave Michael's mind. He grabbed his laptop and typed into Google, "coffee and male energy." What he found was shocking. Studies showed that caffeine could lower testosterone levels, gradually draining a man's strength and vitality. It also revealed that coffee raises cortisol levels, the stress hormone, which, when chronically high, destroys the body's energy. He read a passage that made his stomach turn. Excessive caffeine consumption can interfere with zinc and magnesium absorption, 2 essential minerals for testosterone production. Over time, this can lead to fatigue, muscle loss, and decreased male energy. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at his half-empty coffee cup beside his laptop. For the first time in his life, he questioned whether it was silently draining his energy. But this was just the first revelation, and the more he researched, the worse it got. The shocking discovery. Michael couldn't sleep that night. With every article he read, his unease grew. He felt deceived. How could something so common, so deeply embedded in his routine for decades, be silently depleting his male energy? He found even more disturbing information. What science says about coffee. Coffee forces the body to release excess cortisol, keeping the system in a constant state of stress. This high level of stress lowers testosterone, the primary hormone responsible for a man's strength, endurance, and vitality. Additionally, caffeine blocks magnesium and zinc absorption, two key minerals for testosterone production. Michael felt a chill. If all of this was true, then it explained why he was feeling weaker every day. But the worst part came when he found a study on caffeine's impact on sleep. Caffeine can remain in the body for up to 12 hours, reducing deep sleep quality and disrupting nighttime hormonal regeneration. As a result, testosterone levels drop significantly, directly affecting energy and focus. Michael closed his eyes. He had always slept 7 to 8 hours a night, yet he woke up exhausted. Now, he understood why. Coffee was preventing his body from entering deep recovery stages. And without this nighttime restoration, his hormones never rebalanced. He glanced at the clock. It was 3 a.m. He looked at his coffee mug, still on the table. For the first time, he felt no desire to drink it. His body had been tricked for too long. Now, he needed to find out how much damage had already been done, and to do that, he had to stop drinking coffee immediately. The silent enemy. The next morning, Michael woke up determined he would no longer drink coffee. But within the first few hours of the day, the symptoms began. The effects of caffeine withdrawal, severe headaches, extreme fatigue, worse than before, irritability, as if everything was bothering him. Michael realized that his body was completely addicted. He had never imagined that a simple morning habit could have such a deep impact on his system. By the third day without coffee, the real test began. He woke up for work, but his mind felt stuck in a fog. His thinking was sluggish, his patience thin. Throughout the day, he noticed something terrifying. Every few hours, his body craved coffee. But what troubled him the most was realizing something obvious that he had never noticed before. Coffee wasn't giving him energy. It was only relieving withdrawal symptoms from an exhaustion that had been building up over years. He was trapped in a vicious cycle. 1. He woke up tired. 2. Drank coffee to wake up. 3. A few hours later, crashed into exhaustion. 4. Needed more coffee to keep going. Each cup wasn't adding energy, it was simply prolonging fatigue. And the worst part? This habit was slowly draining his natural ability to have energy. By day 5 without coffee, Michael looked at himself in the mirror. He was tired, sleepy, still weak, but for the first time, he felt in control. He was confronting years of dependence, and now he needed a plan. He wouldn't just break this addiction. He was going to recover his energy for good, but he still had no idea that this battle was just beginning. The impact on the male body. The first few days without coffee were pure torture for Michael. He felt an overwhelming exhaustion, his head pounded, his muscles felt weak, and worst of all, his mind was foggy. By the 5th day, he looked at himself in the mirror. He looked older, his face was tired, his skin dull, and his eyes lifeless. But this didn't make sense. If coffee was the problem, why did he feel even worse without it? Then he remembered something he had read. Your body takes time to adjust when you remove a stimulant it has depended on for years. Michael took a deep breath. He had to push through. But in the middle of all this exhaustion, unexpected changes began to appear. What was happening to his body? He no longer experienced sudden peaks and crashes in energy. His mood, though unstable, felt more natural, without those moments of extreme irritability. And, most surprisingly, his hunger patterns were changing. Michael realized that, when he drank coffee, his body's hunger signals were completely out of sync. Now, without caffeine, he felt hunger at the right times, without sudden cravings for sugar or processed foods. But there was still one last piece of the puzzle he hadn't considered, and it was hidden in what he added to his coffee. The food that was ruining everything. Michael had always thought his only problem was coffee. But then, he remembered something Tom had said. It's not just the coffee, it's what you put in it. He started thinking. For years, he had added sugar and artificial sweeteners to his coffee, believing it was harmless. But then, he decided to research the impact of sugar and sweeteners on male energy. What he found was even worse than he expected. How sugar and sweeteners were sabotaging everything. Sugar caused spikes in insulin, leading to a sharp energy crash soon after. Excessive sugar raised stress levels, increasing cortisol and, once again, destroying testosterone. Artificial sweeteners tricked the brain, making it release insulin even without real glucose, completely disrupting metabolism. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. For years, he had been drinking coffee with sugar every morning, thinking it was just a small pleasure in his day. But, in reality, he had been programming his body to rely on a vicious cycle of artificial energy and crashes. And the scariest part? Coffee plus sugar was the perfect formula for draining male energy. Coffee wore down testosterone through chronic stress. Sugar stole real energy, forcing the body to crave more stimulation. Together, they created a biochemical trap where the body believed it needed more and more of both just to function. Michael felt his chest tighten. He had been deceived. He had spent decades believing that coffee was fueling his energy, when in reality, coffee and sugar were draining his vitality all along. Now, he understood the problem, but he still needed a solution. Something that would give him real energy. Something that would help his body recover from years of damage. And in that moment, he made a decision. He wouldn't just eliminate coffee, he would rebuild his body from the ground up. Coffee on an empty stomach. The biggest mistake of all. Michael thought he had finally understood everything about coffee's effects on his body. But then, he discovered something that made it even worse. He had always drunk coffee on an empty stomach. And when he researched this habit, he realized that it was one of the biggest mistakes he could have made. Why drinking coffee on an empty stomach is so destructive. In the morning, the body is naturally sensitive to cortisol, and drinking coffee at this time spikes this stress hormone even higher. This means that instead of waking up naturally with stable energy, Michael was forcing his body into a constant state of stress. Over time, this depleted his testosterone and drained his ability to recover. He realized that coffee wasn't just the problem. It was when he drank it that made it even worse. Immediate effects of coffee on an empty stomach. A temporary energy spike, followed by a brutal crash. Insulin levels became unbalanced, making him hungrier and craving sugar later in the day. Over the long term, this wrecked his metabolism and accelerated aging. Michael felt a knot in his stomach. That morning routine he had followed for decades had been draining his vitality from the very first sip. Now, he had a choice. Continue repeating this mistake, or change everything for good. The next morning, he did something different. What he tested: no coffee first thing in the morning, drank a glass of lemon water to hydrate his body first, ate a handful of nuts to stabilize his insulin before having anything stimulating. The result? For the first time, he didn't feel that energy spike followed by a crash. His mind felt more stable, without brain fog. His body began to respond naturally to hunger and fatigue. Michael realized that he should have never been drinking coffee on an empty stomach. But now he knew how to correct that mistake. And his transformation was just beginning. The effect on sleep and recovery. Even after making all these changes, Michael still felt something was off. He was sleeping 7 to 8 hours per night, but never woke up feeling rested. So, he started researching the impact of caffeine on sleep quality. What he discovered changed everything. The big problem: caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, preventing the body from feeling naturally tired at night. This meant that, even when he slept, his brain wasn't entering full recovery mode. Additionally, caffeine disrupted melatonin production, lowering the quality of deep sleep. Michael realized that he had never actually been resting. What was happening? His body accumulated fatigue every night, making him more exhausted over time. His testosterone levels dropped, because the highest surge of this hormone occurs during deep sleep. His nervous system never fully shut down, keeping him in a constant state of alertness. Now it made sense why he always woke up tired, even after sleeping enough hours. The solution: 1. No coffee after 2 p.m. 2. Created a nighttime routine to promote deep sleep. 3. Ensured his last meal had no hidden stimulants. After the first week of these changes, something incredible happened. The results: for the first time, he slept deeply through the entire night. He woke up feeling truly refreshed, without morning exhaustion. His mind was sharper, and his energy felt more natural. Michael realized that caffeine wasn't just robbing his energy during the day, it was sabotaging his recovery at night. And now, he finally felt like he had control over his body again. The final challenge. Michael now knew the truth. He had experienced it, felt it in his own body, and overcome an invisible battle that millions of men don't even realize they're fighting. But he knew that if he just told people this, most wouldn't believe him. So, he decided to issue a challenge: the 7-day no coffee challenge. Rule 1: no coffee or any caffeinated drinks for 1 week. Rule 2: replace them with natural options, like herbal teas or pure cacao. Rule 3: take note of the symptoms and observe how your body reacts. He started sharing this challenge with friends and coworkers. The reaction was always the same: impossible. I can't live without coffee. This is nonsense. Coffee isn't bad for you. I don't even want to know what I'd feel like without it. Michael smiled. He knew that these weren't their real responses. It was the addiction talking. He looked one of his colleagues in the eye and said, "If you think you can't go 7 days without coffee, then you're already more trapped than you realize." That direct challenge to their ego made some of them reconsider. And some decided to try it. The results were shocking. The first few days, they all suffered the same symptoms Michael had faced: fatigue, headaches, irritability. But after a few days, they started noticing the benefits: more stable energy, deeper sleep, less anxiety. One participant's confession: "Man, I realized I've never actually had real energy. Coffee was just covering up my exhaustion." At that moment, Michael understood the real impact of what he was doing. He wasn't just quitting coffee, he was waking men up to a completely new way of living, and most people would go their whole lives without even realizing this problem existed. Now, he had just one last thing to say, and this was the most important part of his journey. The final wake-up call. Michael looked back and saw how much he had changed in just a few months. He had gone from being a man constantly tired, addicted to caffeine, and drained of energy, to someone fully in control of his vitality. He realized something terrifying about the modern world. Most men will never know what it feels like to have full energy. They go their entire lives feeling tired, thinking it's normal. They rely on coffee, sugar, and stimulants to compensate for something they don't even realize they've lost. And when they finally understand it, they're already older, weaker, and with no motivation to change. Michael felt a shiver down his spine. He never wanted to be that kind of man, but he almost was. And now, he knew he had to leave one final question for any man listening to his story. The ultimate question: do you want to spend the rest of your life as a tired, ordinary man, always needing coffee just to function? Or do you want to be a high-performance man with stable energy, strength, and vitality? Michael knew his answer, and now he was ready to help other men wake up too. Because no one should go their whole life without knowing what it's like to live with full energy. The power was always inside him. He just had to wake up.